I know people laugh at me because they'll see me all over town, plop down in a coffee shop or a fast food place or a restaurant bar or whatever with my iPad working when I've got a beautiful office. But there are times when I know if I go somewhere and there's nothing but strangers around me, I get a lot more done sometimes. And I can tune out the noise very easily around me to do projects when I'm sitting at a table by myself and there's nobody around that's going to interrupt. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's helpful to kind of separate yourself from the space just to be able to stay on target.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Interlux Auctions, your solution to guarantee competitive offers on your luxury listings with no compromise to commission. Visit Interlux.com today to find out more. That's INTERLUXE.com.
Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. The podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. I'm Tami Sims, lead trainer for the Institute and a full-time real estate professional in St. Petersburg, Florida for more than 2 decades. In our last episode, we talked about the importance of strategic business planning. Today, we're going to take that a step further and explore how you move from that planning to results. We're going to talk about some of the daily and regular habits of top producing real estate professionals. I'm here today with my co-host, Jack Miller, a 25 plus year veteran luxury agent with Onward Real Estate in the greater Nashville, Tennessee market. Jack, it's great to see you.
You too, Tami. Good to see you as well.
Excellent. I don't know if you have been thinking about that business planning episode since we recorded it last time, but I think it's always a good idea to figure out how to take that to the next step. Right?
No,
Would
I
you agree? Whether
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
marketing plan for a listing or anything, you can have a great plan, but if you don't implement it, then it's not really any good. So I thought maybe you and I would talk a little bit about some of the things that we do in our day-to-day, some of the priorities that we keep, and perhaps even some other real estate professionals that we know that maybe do it differently, that we can share some ideas. So I want to kick it off with you, Jack. What does a typical day look like for you?
It's interesting. I've been thinking about this. I don't know if we have a typical day, truly. I mean, we do have a plan.
That's
We
true.
always have a plan. But that's one of the things I love about this business is that every day is a little bit different. It really depends on what the client base looks like at the time. Right now, we're very heavy on sellers. And so my day looks a little different than it did, say, a year ago when we had a more balanced market here in Nashville. And so now much more of my energy is spent toward communicating with sellers and focusing on the marketing side as opposed to working with buyers, which we do as well. So it's changed a little bit. But I guess if I were to try to boil it down to what is typical, we're spending a fair amount of time attending broker opens, networking with other professionals in the luxury market here, seeing what the inventory looks like, knowing it, and really trying to support each other, not just within our own firm, but with the other firms in the marketplace. Because right now we have a really pretty large inventory in the Nashville market and not as much buyer activity. And so we've done a lot more of that. So networking, communicating with my sellers. And then I think the other part of a typical day is now especially is really on lead generation for buyers. Because that's where our need is right now. That's what boosts up. That's what helps our seller clients is bringing the buyers to the table. And so we're focusing on that more. So I think those are the activities that we're seeing a lot right now in our current market.
I think that that's a great deal of wisdom right there, just right off the top here, is that in our industry, we have to give ourselves a little permission and a little grace that things can change.
Mm-hmm.
So when we set these really tangible goals of, I know a lot of folks are focused on make this many phone calls a day to this many people and do this many handwritten notes and all of that sort of thing. We have to understand that we've got some flexibility. based on what's happening. So
Absolutely.
I agree with you. I'm spending an awful lot of time networking with other real estate professionals. I think that's important, not just from the point that you made, but also just solidifying those relationships so that when we have transactions that we're working together, that we've really fostered a good relationship that makes a huge difference in how the transaction goes.
Absolutely, yeah. We've had just recently, in fact, we've had a couple of transactions with the same agents um, again in a short period of time. And it reminds me, one case it was a buyer transaction, another case it was a seller transaction. But I have to believe that sometimes those things aren't accidental. Obviously, we're all working for the needs of our buyers and our sellers. But I think that when we're talking with our clients, let's say buyers, for example, about the listing opportunities that are out there or the listings that are out there, and they're starting to focus on different ones. I find that we are talking with our clients too about not just the home and the fit, but also the transaction and understanding the relationship with the seller and the listing broker and how that can make for a smooth transaction. And it tends to draw you in toward some listings, perhaps a little more than others, because of those relationships.
Yeah.
I think that impacts sometimes how we show properties, especially when you have an abundance of inventory. You can't show it all. We got a lot of inventory.
Right.
And when our
Right.
clients are asking our help and trying to narrow that down, that's part of the process. Where can we find a really smooth transaction for our client and at the same time finding the really best fit? So there's other dynamics that go into play here other than just being the best house for the client, because we all know this. There's not just one house for this particular buyer. There's probably a number of homes that would be a really good fit.
Yep.
So there's other dynamics that come into play, I think.
Yeah. And when we think about how much time we're servicing existing clients versus fostering relationships with previous clients, our larger
Mhm.
sphere of influence, I think it really does depend on what we've got for nuts and bolts tasks on the
Mhm.
table on any given day. Um, I know that once a week I like to look ahead and see which people who are in our database have a birthday or a home anniversary or some sort of significant milestone, and even if I schedule out an email to go on a later day or schedule a text to go at a later day, I like having, maybe like one little block of time on our Monday morning to look ahead and make sure that those things are taken care of. We know we're touching
Mhm.
people that are important to us, and then we don't get caught up in the minutia.
Absolutely. I think to Tammy, I think we also have to have, when you talk about the goals and what the typical day looks like, they have to be somewhat measurable too. You made the comment earlier about how many thank you notes to write or something of that nature. And that's, I think having goals that are measurable is a big deal. Knowing, is there a target number of listings that we're trying to manage? Is there a
Hmm.
target number of buyers we're trying to keep going at a given time? It's really helpful to have goals that we work toward and that are measurable in that regard. Because if you just do stuff and you don't have a plan,
Yeah.
then at the end of the year, if you don't hit your quote goal number, then you didn't have a successful year. And so we try to lay all that out with our business plan for the year. But then my business partner and I meet weekly, as we've
Yep.
talked about before. We meet every week, and every week we look at our buyers, our sellers, our prospective buyers and sellers, and what we're doing, what steps we're taking to achieve our goals.
Exactly, and I do the same. And when I think about other colleagues in the industry, particularly in a national setting, um, some that have larger teams with more
Hmm.
structure, but I hear
Hmm.
a lot that they are putting their heads together and making sure that everybody's on the same page and that everybody's aware of where transactions are and what processes are happening. So I think that's definitely a common theme among successful real estate professionals is that kind of communication and paying attention to where you are in the overall goal. But it is so easy for us to get sidetracked,
Oh, big
right?
time, big time.
So
There are
I'm
so many. I mean, you
curious.
can sit here and talk about what are distractions in real estate. We can list hundreds of distractions. A day is full of distractions.
Absolutely. How do you manage that? Is there any way that if you're focusing on something that needs your full attention,
Mhm.
um, um, is there a methodology? Is it the focus thing? Is it how do you keep from getting taken off track?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, one of the things that's a big distraction for us personally is email. And I say that because I think we have about 15,000 agents in our marketplace. That number seems to be changing daily, so I'm not sure where we are, but I think it's around 15,000 in our marketplace. And I think also about a third of them like to send emails to all the rest of us a couple times a week. However, that boils out, we end up getting several hundred junk mails a day. Um,
Absolutely.
and I don't mean to suggest that marketing emails are quote inherently junk. What I'm talking about is when I get an email from an agent who's 2 counties away for a price range that's a fourth of what I typically sell, or it's a 500-acre tract 2 hours from where I work.
Yeah.
They haven't done their homework, and those types of emails filling up our email is a big distraction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I try to go through email. I treat emails and text differently. I don't know about you, Tammy, but I don't go through emails as they come in. I couldn't possibly do it. It's too much. So I sit down 2 or 3 times a day and I look at email and I hit the delete button over and over, getting rid of the emails I know are obviously not really targeted for
Yeah.
me or not relevant for me. And then I save those emails from our colleagues. I feel like this is probably something that would be worth diving into. And then you have the emails that are specifically to me or to you that you
Right.
obviously need to respond to. And so
Yeah.
I do that 2 or 3 times a day. By breaking that out into several sit downs rather than doing it as it comes in,
Yeah.
it helps me keep focused. That's the activity. That's all I do during that activity.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I have to share, I had a little personal win. I've been doing some business travel recently, and I get some of my best work done in airports and airplanes.
Sure. Yeah.
Particularly um, catching up on email. And
Hmm.
I got my email inbox to zero.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even know what it would look like, right? And so I
I don't think
got
I've ever
that
seen
email
zero.
inbox to zero, and I was really pleased with myself, right? Really pleased with myself.
Mhm.
That's one of the things too when we talk about our styles and that sort of thing. I can't function until I've addressed everything in my inbox, right? I know
Right.
there's some people that never file their emails out, and I can't imagine that. But I do get a great sense of satisfaction when I have managed
Yeah.
that inbox. But you're absolutely right; it has to be kind of structured, or else you could easily just be responding to emails all day long. Um,
Well, there's also talking about distractions. There's lots of different types of distractions. There are distractions in the office.
yeah,
It's you want to have a good relationship with your colleagues in the office. You want to network your colleagues in the office, but there's a time for that, and there's a time you need to sit down in your office and get something done, and you've got to separate yourself, and that's hard to do sometimes.
yeah,
I know people laugh at me because they'll see me all over town, plop down in a coffee shop or a fast food place or a restaurant bar or whatever with my iPad working when I've got a beautiful office. But there are times when I know if I go somewhere and there's nothing but strangers around me, I get a lot more done sometimes. And I can tune out the noise very easily around me to do projects when I'm sitting at a table by myself and there's nobody around that's going to interrupt. And so
yeah,
sometimes it's helpful to kind of separate yourself from the space just to be able to stay on target with a particular project. And again, with the business we're in, I don't know about you, Tammy, but we got a pretty large geographical area that we cover here. And so when we're going back and forth from appointments, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to come back to home base as far as the office
right.
goes. And so the office becomes wherever we are on the fly. It's
That's
like
right.
and I've got my favorite little haunts that I go to routinely that I drop in, sit down, make in my office, get a cup of coffee, then tip really well because I'm tying up a table, but I make sure I make it worth their while, the server's while. But it's a really nice way to make use of that time and to eliminate the distractions. And that's how it works
Yeah.
for me. And everybody has a different method. What do you do? What helps for you?
Yeah, very similarly. I'm not at my office very often, my physical office, because I'm either out in the field or, it is much easier to do these recordings and whatnot away from my broker's office. But I do make sure that I pass through. But I always find when I'm there, there's a conversation to be had with somebody else, right? So it's very difficult to sit down and focus on a task. So I'm betting that some of our listeners struggle a little bit with that. And I love to go other places. The third place, they call it. I remember back in the day when Starbucks was the rage, right? And the new thing, and they were calling themselves the third place, right? So you've got home and the office and then the third place. But I do think that it's a good idea to find a different space. And, on that same sort of topic, if we think about things that are true revenue generator, things that really require expertise, let's talk a little bit about trying to avoid the tasks and the things that aren't the highest and best use of our time, right? And
Sure.
and I say this from a point of I'm a control freak, and so I know that I'm going to do it better, but it's not necessarily the best use of my time. Do you have any instances like that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, this has become commonplace now, is this is not rocket science, but I think pretty much all of your top producers, if they don't have a full-time assistant, on staff for them, I know a lot of big teams, they have a full-time staff person handling contract management, contract to closing. But even individual agents and small teams will often outsource that to a third party to handle contract to closing duties. And that has been a tremendous time saver, because what happens between contract and closing isn't generating more revenue on the assumption it's going to close. So it's important you get a really good contract manager, a transaction manager. And that's been a real blessing for us. And so one of the things we learned early on is some of these companies, these third party service providers that do that contract to closing, each time you put a contract in, a new person is looking at your contract. We quickly found that doesn't work. That's a distraction. And so what we did was determine we got one person we always work with, still third party, but the same person touches all of our files. So we don't have to waste any time explaining how we like to do things, how we like to organize. That you learn the rhythm of each other.
Yeah.
And so that's been having somebody I can truly trust from A to Z, from contract to closing, where they pull me in as I'm needed, has been really, really helpful. And I think that's a critical piece.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting. So my transaction manager had previously worked for my team with my mom and I and my brother full time. And then things shifted and she started her own business providing contract services, transaction management services, not only to us, but to other agents. But she is ours. And I have a leg up because she and I met at a slumber party in high school. So when you talk about somebody knowing
history,
your nuances, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely critical. I can't imagine using a service where there was somebody different each time. Because she and I know each other's strengths and weaknesses and that sort of thing. And I couldn't agree more that transaction management is absolutely something to keep us from some of the things that aren't necessarily the highest and best use of our times. And I remember when we started in this business, there was no such thing as transaction management services.
That's right.
And so I think that's great. And I know that my transaction manager, because she spent so much time, she learned the industry from my mom and I and my brother. And so she finds it an asset that when she's working with a newer agent, that she is bringing that wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, providing even more of a benefit to her other realtor clients. So I love seeing that whole symbiosis.
Oh, for sure. And I will say this too, if we have listeners to the podcast that are new to the industry and they haven't done a lot of transactions yet, I would have a caveat where this is concerned. That is, don't rush out and get a contract manager. if you're not doing enough transactions to justify a contract manager, you should manage your own. And the reason I say that is because before you can hire somebody else to do that job that you know how to do, is you need to know how to do it really, really well.
Yeah,
So the person you hire matches your expectations, and you know how to hire somebody who does it really well. Um,
absolutely.
and you need to understand what all the pieces are that come into play between contract and closing. So I just want to throw that out there too. If you're new to the industry, learn that part yourself, know how to
Yeah,
manage it, and then hire somebody when you have so much volume coming in that you want to focus, as you started this conversation, focus on those activities that generate revenue and allow those administrative items, for example, to be handled by a third party or someone else so you can focus on what brings in the money.
yeah, I think that's a great point. Now, I want to talk too about. We've been talking really tactical things about our profession, but it's super easy for realtors to get so tied up in business that we don't make time for family. And so,
Yep.
one of the questions that gets posed is when you are planning your time and trying to make sure that you've got balance of important things, how do you fit in things that are non-negotiable, like family or health or spirituality, any of those sorts of things, and then how do you keep them from getting stepped on by other interruptions? I know your time with family is super, super important, and
Mhm.
I admire you for being able to make that a super priority.
Yeah, I remember a commercial, and interestingly, I don't remember the product they were advertising any longer, but there was a commercial a few years ago where a little girl kept trying to talk to her mom, and her mom said, "Shh, I'm on the phone. I'm with a client." And this happened several times. And one day the kid approaches her mom and says, "I want to be a client." And then her mom suddenly realizes that what she was missing out on and tried to refocus. So I think it's really important that we do protect the family time, the personal time. But I think the key to that, Tammy, honestly, is the communication we have with our clients on the front
Right.
end. So when I meet with a new buyer or a new seller, and before I even talk about what my expectations are, more importantly, I want to hear what their expectations are. And so I'll ask them, tell me about your experience with communication in formal real estate transactions. Who did it well? Who did it according to your expectation? And what are your expectations? I want to hear them tell me how often they want to hear from me and by what means and what should that look like. And then that's a really nice segue for me to talk about how I like to communicate.
Right.
And so, for example, one of the things I share with my clients, as we talked about earlier with the emails, I'll tell them, just like I share with our listeners here, is that we get 300 junk mails a day. So please don't send a routine email and expect a quick response. Or if you have something that's really important, hey, shoot me a text. Hey, I just dropped you this email covering these
Right.
documents, yada yada. Can take a look, and I'm on it. I'm all over it, and I get it done quickly and back to them. And so I talk about what it looks like from my end. And one of the things I always share, Tammy, is I tell my clients that um, if we're doing something that's time critical, if we're negotiating contracts, scheduling something that's we're going to lose something if we don't schedule it right away, anything that's time critical, I'm always reachable
Yeah.
one way or another. But if we're talking about routine business, there's a time of day when I stop and I don't do routine business past that time. And so I give them examples of what routine business looks like and what things are time critical. So obviously negotiating a contract, we're not going to wait till tomorrow at 9 o'clock a.m. If something's hot tonight, we got to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to handle it. But again, most of what we do can be planned and scheduled. And there are things that fall into that category. And that's
Yeah.
the way we try to protect that by having that communication with our clients on the front end, and then on the back end, just checking in with them to make sure that they're hearing from us the way that they like, and
Yeah.
it seems to go really well that way.
What's interesting is that I have heard you say, and probably me too, several times in our conversation today, the importance of setting expectations.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's true of ourselves too, right? Like I'm a to-do list person.
Yeah, same.
I have a to-do list, and I have prioritization codes, and I have segments of this and that and the other. I do a lot of community service, volunteer work, chamber committees, that sort of thing. So I have little blocks on my to-do list, And if I think about if I think about what my day is going to look like, I look and see which are the priorities. Sometimes it means I get up a little bit earlier so that I can focus on this that isn't necessarily the kind of activity that falls in my regular day. But I always try to make sure that it's manageable, right?
Mhm.
Setting expectations with myself of this is what I can reasonably expect to accomplish today, and all these other things are just going to go out of my brain so that it doesn't get overwhelming. It's kind of like snoozing emails
Mhm.
that you can, right? So I'm not going to need this until Thursday, so it's not going to stay in my inbox. I'm going to snooze it to Thursday, if you will. So I know that's kind of important for me too.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about with the technologies that we have today is that you can do things on the fly. So if you find yourself with a 20-minute gap or a half-hour gap between appointments and you don't have something structured, that's a perfect time to look down at your to-do list. What can I do that I can do in 30 minutes and knock something out? And there's always something, writing an amendment or whatever it is, that's something typically we have the transaction manager do. Perhaps we have to write language and help them out with the language to use an amendment
Mm-hmm.
contract or whatever. But yeah, it's nice to be able to handle that in that regard, I think.
Yeah. And when we talk about setting expectations, those of our regular listeners know already my passion for my farmers market that I am
Mhm.
involved with. And so that's a clear expectation that I set that Saturdays until after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to be at the farmers market, and they can find me. They can come talk to me there. I'm delighted for them to do that. But if someone, if we're trying to schedule showing property, seeing a particular listing, if it needs to happen on this Saturday, I'll make it happen. Right. Just like
Mhm.
you were saying, if something needs to happen at an odd time, but if it doesn't absolutely have to be on a Saturday, then I've set the expectation with my clients that sure, we can do it Friday, we can do it Sunday, we can, do something else, but kind of setting those expectations and boundaries, if you will,
Mhm.
with clients.
No, I
And
agree. And again, one of the things I've found through the years as we have increased both our production and our typical price points on our closings, is I find that, and this is, I think a lot of folks are surprised by this, but I think generally speaking, most of our clients in the luxury space tend to understand and respect that more than those who work in the lower price points. I think it's because they value that themselves, and I would say on that note too, I think as we're talking about planning and having goals, and you're trying to reach goals. One of the things is very important as we're talking about clients is knowing when to say no. There's some clients that aren't for us,
yeah,
and you know it when you see it. We had a really wonderful listing opportunity just a couple of weeks ago, and I say wonderful in terms of it's a wonderful home, a great location, wonderful neighborhood. But the person that we would be working with, it tried really hard to hire us. It would have been a time suck. It would have
mm,
been someone who would have, every day would have been manipulating us and and pulling us away from all other clients and all other activities, and they would be the client, the one person you'd have to be dealing with, and and for some agents maybe that's where they are in their business, but I feel like they need to take
yeah,
that kind of business to uh, increase their profile in the industry, but that's not where we are. And so
right.
for me and mine, I want to have clients that I love working with, but also clients that I respect their time and their family time, and I want folks who respect mine as well. And that
Yeah.
allows me to get a lot more done too when we have that type of relationship.
Sure. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because as people ask us to, what are the habits of successful real estate professionals, I think that one of the things that newer agents will get to and can aspire to is the ability to turn down business, like you've just said, that
Mhm.
doesn't match. Sometimes it's your ethics that don't match.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's communication styles, and building your professional savvy to the point where you are comfortable not taking every piece of business because you can identify that I think is something to look forward to. And I'm getting better at that.
It's hard.
It
It is.
is.
It's hard to say no to somebody, particularly when they really want to hire you. The one I was referring to a moment ago, after I just told them I felt like it just wasn't the right fit, and I wished them the very best. Called me 3 more times, wanting me to give more detail why this wasn't a good fit. I didn't want to give that specific a detail.
Right.
Ironically, this is a listing that one of my colleagues from a different company had. He's been in the business as long as I have. He had this listing for a month and dropped it. And when the seller called me after meeting with the seller a couple of times, having 2 or 3 conversations on the phone, I understood exactly why I dropped it. And then that agent and I ended up at a wine tasting 2 nights ago. There's a builder in town doing a spectacular home in Green Hills in the right, toward the urban core in Nashville. And so they invited 24 agents, one long dining table to have a wine tasting event and to see this home. And he was sitting directly across from me. I said, I have a story for you. I said, now I don't want to hear yours. I said, I want to hear why you dropped this listing. He said, did he call you? I said, yes. He said, did he call you before he hired me or after? I said, I got the after call. He said, yeah, because there was one before me too that dropped him before I got him. And he said, and then we dropped him. I said, well, it was the best move we made. I said, that's going to be a tough road for somebody.
Yeah.
But I know that would have really, we already have some wonderful clients we're working with, and the market's sluggish right now.
Yeah.
For sellers. And so
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we have ample time to dedicate to all of our existing sellers before taking something on new, and definitely not that one. So
For sure. And that's an interesting thing. Think about a realtor saying, I'm sorry, I'm not able to take on new clients at this moment, right? It's like your dentist, you're looking for a new dentist or a doctor. Sorry, we're not taking new patients, right? And so when you consider that in terms of we as professionals, we need to understand when we hit that limit as well. Just like you said, you've got to be able to provide the level of service to all of your clients. And it was interesting. One listing that I did not accept recently, it was a significantly lower price point than I typically work in. And it was about a 45-minute drive. And this was a referral from a dear friend, right? So, in my heart, I wanted to help them, but also in my gut, I knew that this was not going to be good use of my time, particularly because the last time that I did a favor in this price point, I realized that given our current conditions, a lot of buyers are reaching out to the listing agent because they're terrified that they're going to have to pay cash money, to have a buyer's agent. And so even if I arranged for lockbox and easy access for the property, I knew that I was going to be there 2 or 3 times a day. And unfortunately, the realtors who tend to be in that price point, they don't show up. They've never met their client before, right? And I'm going through in my head all of this is not going to be a good positive experience for me. But what I did is I did some research and I met with the people for about an hour in their home. And I said, so I'm not the right realtor for you, but let's talk about how you might make a wise decision on who would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's terrific.
And that was actually providing them the best service that I possibly could have. So they're happy. My friend is happy, the mutual friend, all of that. And I just felt so good for not taking a piece of business that wasn't going to be a good fit. So that's definitely something to work towards for those that are newer or don't have that, don't have that luxury, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and again, when we're talking about planning and executing our plan and reaching our goals, those are the types of things that play into that as well. Things can hold us back. So you have to get rid of dead weight, things that hold you down, things like administrative duties, contract closing duties. These are things that hold us back from generating revenue. And this is a business.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's worked in the luxury market and has done that routinely, clearly they evolved to that space and they know how to run a business. And we're all getting better at it all the time. But I think a lot of newer agents forget sometimes this is not community service where everybody who comes along, yeah, I'll stick a sign in the yard, lockbox on the door, and we'll go. That's not what we do. At least that's not what I think any of us should be doing.
Right,
So,
exactly. And particularly in the upper tier, we should be focused on. I just delivered a webinar just an hour before we started the conversation today about delivering concierge level service. And
yes.
that's about quality, not quantity, and it's about matching the expectations of a sophisticated clientele in the upper tier, and really focusing on that superior level of service versus transactional or other type of consideration. So I think that's really important to think of. I want to ask, both of us meet weekly to
Mm-hmm.
have a grip on where we are and that sort of thing. And I know I've got a tickler in our weekly team agenda that that tells me like other big projects that are coming up, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
there's quarterly cycles of things, right? I have a little reminder that that's coming up. How often do you look back at your annual plan? Or
Um,
is that a component of your weekly?
no, not uh, well. Yes, it's definitely a component, but it's not something we do weekly. So I would say quarterly. It's just a natural time for us to do it because we're meeting every week, and at some point we start measuring. Okay, where are we in terms of reaching our annual goal? How is business? And so I'd say quarterly we're reviewing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Do we need to
And
adjust? Are we in
yeah,
good shape?
exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
happy to report, because we did this just recently. This year, we're way ahead of our goal, which is terrific. But unfortunately, I'm seeing a very slow market in Nashville over the next 5 or 6 months. I'm not seeing the second half of the year being as active as the first half. I hope I'm wrong, but fortunately we are way ahead of our goals, so we'll hopefully hit our goals anyway. Um, but I just saw I think news from Realtor.com very recently that was profiling the most sluggish markets in the country, and we made the top five.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? That's just
Austin leading
wow.
the herd. Austin was number one,
Interesting.
and Nashville, I think we were number four on that list. But I feel it. I can tell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so again, as we're talking about setting goals, we also have to talk about adjusting goals.
Right.
As time goes by during the calendar year or the fiscal year, and you're evaluating how your performance is, you also have to give yourself some grace for what things are happening in the marketplace that you didn't plan for, maybe couldn't plan for.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so one of the things I would like to plan for is for the interest rates to come down just a little bit. That would help quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm experiencing a similar thing. I don't know that I have the kind of forecast for as long as you do in your marketplace. I personally am seeing a summer slump that I haven't seen in a while. But
Mhm,
like you, I had a very strong first half of the year, which is really good when you're comparing
mhm,
that to your annual goals, right?
mhm,
But again, we have to space these things out,
mhm,
and it's interesting to see. It's interesting to observe the attitudes around us, right, and
mhm,
the mass media messaging, and then relate that back to what are we seeing and feeling in our niche market,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Is it tracking, or is it performing a little bit differently? So I think those are always really important. But you're absolutely right. You have to readjust if economic conditions or market conditions come into play. I mean, gosh, do you remember when COVID happened?
Mhm.
Talk about needing to reset some goals, and then all of a sudden reset them in the opposite direction
Yeah,
because we were speed racing
yeah.
to get people houses, right?
Yes, my
So
business partner Robert was making a joke about this, and this is a joke. But he said, we need another COVID." I said, "No, we don't need COVID." He said, "No, I don't mean literally COVID. Obviously, we don't need COVID, but
right,
that
some
was
impetus for
we need a
yeah,
boost to the economy and to the housing market."
yeah,
Yeah, you're right. When COVID hit, we thought we were hitting another 2008 where the bottom fell out, and that was going to be it
yes,
for years. It felt that way,
yeah,
and
yeah,
all of a sudden,
yeah,
it's like, man, we couldn't keep up. It was
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
And there's a lot of agents. We're seeing this too, both locally and nationally. We're seeing with the numbers, a lot of agents are hanging their licenses up,
yeah,
particularly those who came into the business during that COVID period or maybe shortly
In the
before,
boom.
and
Yeah.
it felt such an easy, task to generate business and generate sales. And the agents who are working in markets that are underperforming, sluggish markets like we have currently, you really have to work the market, and you really
Yeah.
have to. That's where you really focus on your skill sets to be able to achieve the goals that you've outlined for your year.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's always going back to the fundamentals. And one of these, as you were talking about today, is your plan, having a plan. You just don't get
Yeah.
up and see what happens during the day. You have a plan for the day, a plan for the week, a plan for the month, a
Yeah.
plan for the
Yeah.
quarter.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely. I like to take some time on Sundays. Sundays, I spend some time doing my bookkeeping and that sort of thing because I can do it with a cup of coffee and in
mhm.
my pajamas, and so that's just a good time. Like people tend to leave you alone a little bit Sunday morning, and I like to look at the week ahead. That's when I like to do it. Is um, it's funny. It's not work time, but it's focus time. It's
Mhm.
planning
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and so I like to get prepared for various things and really just kind of get my hands around what the week ahead looks like, and then know that things can change. Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
I had an agent call me this week who has a listing in the luxury market here, and but it's a first for her. And she said, "Jack, what am I doing wrong?" She said, "It's just we're just not getting an activity. We're not getting showings." I said, "You're not doing anything wrong." I said, "That's a lot of folks are experiencing that right now." I said, "The main thing is continue to communicate with your seller. Make sure they understand that you're paying attention, and show them what you're doing to try to get exposure. Keep doing what you're doing." And that goes back to connecting with your colleagues, because having that connection, that relationships with your colleagues, both in-house and with other companies, helps keep your spirits up when you're having a tough road, whether it's something you're doing personally or that's a challenge,
yeah,
or whether it's a market challenge. I think that
yeah.
helps a lot. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about things that are non-negotiable or things that we've tried really hard to make sure that we're incorporating, those times with our colleagues, producing colleagues,
mhm.
is super important. So the luxury networking group that I participate in that meets monthly, I will try really hard to make sure that that's protected in my
Mhm.
calendar. And largely the only time that I miss is if I'm traveling for the institute or something like that. But that has become very important. And so the person that invited me, pretty please, to join that group, who is a religious listener to our podcast,
Mhm. Oh, good.
I will say that I am grateful for that nudge, because I think it took me from a place that was a little more silo
Mhm.
and really showed me the importance of building those relationships and being outside. Like we can get so focused on tasks and those things that are on the to-do list, but interacting and understanding what your colleagues are seeing, as you just said, right? Having a
Mhm.
sense of what other people are seeing, feeling, hearing is really important. So I would encourage any of our listeners to make sure that they are taking the opportunity and prioritizing the opportunity to interact in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and
So
I think that's really constructive, really good time spent, because oftentimes what we gain from that, you don't know what to expect from it, but there's always something positive I think that comes from that. And one of the things that always comes from it is it gives us a sense, a pulse of the marketplace to report back to our clients. We
yeah,
can tell our buyers, tell our sellers what other agents are
yeah,
seeing in the marketplace, not just our opinion, but
yeah,
kind of our informal survey of what's happening in the marketplace. And I think those are very meaningful conversations, and it
yeah.
gives context to what we're trying to do. So
Yeah. And not just within our local markets, but I feel strongly that people should be attending conferences and networking with other real estate professionals elsewhere. But I just got back from a mastermind retreat, luxury specific mastermind retreat, 7 realtors from all different parts of the country, renting a house on Lake Michigan with no cell service, I might
Oh,
add.
wow.
They had Wi-Fi, but no cell service, which is a little gut dropping when you're in the Uber almost there and you're not quite sure where this road is going. And all of a sudden you've lost your cell service, right? I'm just saying. But the opportunity to spend a couple of days in that mastermind environment, and to hear what other people are experiencing and where they are, it goes back to making sure that you take time not just to work in your business but on your business. And I think equally having those opportunities to come back and share with your clients what you're hearing, what's happening in other parts of the country, is equally valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. Yeah, it was like I said, when I was reading the report from realtor.com and seeing the cities that were in the top 5 I referenced earlier, Austin has always been one of those sister cities to Nashville.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities, and they're all obvious, I would say. But it was interesting to see them in the same boat we are, because both cities have often been cited in prior reports as being in the top 5 for the most
Right.
inbound buyers coming in. Blah blah
Right.
blah. The market's
Right.
crazy busy,
Right.
yada yada. And now we're both in this top 5 list, which I'm sure
Right.
neither of us want to be
I
in.
should look at that list and see where we fall in that, because interestingly, the Austin Nashville correlation, St. Petersburg is often put in that little grouping as well. So
Mhm.
interesting to see on that. Well, so I think we could go on and on about this, and I hope the listeners know how much we always enjoy the opportunity to connect with each other and share things with the audience. But our time today is coming to an end. So, Jack, any last thoughts that you want to share about taking your plan and making it turn into results?
I think the closing thought for me, Tammy, would be, we've talked about mentors in past podcasts,
Mhm.
is if this is something you haven't been doing, is sit down with your mentor and have them help you put together a plan.
Yeah.
If you don't have a mentor of sorts, one, I would recommend that. But if you don't have a mentor, then sit down with some successful colleagues, people that you admire as
Yeah.
far as what they're able to do, what their brand looks like, and perhaps they can help you with your plan.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I love about our business is that whether we're in the same company or competing companies, the best of the best tend to want to help. And
That's
so
right.
there's always somebody out there who would love to see you succeed.
Yeah.
And yes, we're competing to some degree, but at the same time, we're all lifting each other up. So find
That's
somebody who
right.
can help you.
And I think that's a fine way to wrap up the conversation for today. So, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the art of selling luxury real estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find more at www.luxuryhomemarketing.com. If you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to consider discussing in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.